I'm Ashton Addison from Investment Pitch Media and the Crypto Coin Show. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Chris Hart, the CEO of Civic. Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on, and it's great to have Civic back.
Thanks, Ashton. Great to be here. I know we were on last year, so more good stuff to talk about. Happy to join.
So much stuff has happened in the cryptocurrency industry since last year. Feels like 10 years. I would love to kick off our conversation by just hearing a little bit about your background, Chris, and how you got involved in blockchain and in Civic.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background actually started in tech. I used to build data centers for high frequency options trading firms. So going way back to the day trader days and the first kind of stock boom when everybody was going to sit at home and make money and not have to go to work and all of that sort of in the early 2000s. So that's kind of like my initial entry point. I was the kind of guy who would build my own computers and server rooms and all that stuff. Later on, went into finance, became a controller, ended up as a CFO for a couple Silicon Valley companies. But there was something always in the back of my mind that said there's got to be a better way to handle technology, to handle data transfer, and in particular, handle money transfers around the globe. So I got introduced to Vinny to answer your question about how into crypto. Once you speak to Vinny, obviously he's been in crypto for a long time, has a lot of background. It's sort of like, the Neo moment on which pill are you going to take? And, for me, it was 2017 when I said, this technology really has legs. It is going to revolutionize the way money is handled. But I think almost even more importantly, it's going to revolutionize the way data gets handled with distributed ledger technology, which is just so powerful and so many applications, which I really believe we're just starting to tap into the potential of what that really means. So I kind of bring a technology, a little bit of a finance background into it. And I joined Civic in 2017, right? So I've been drinking from the fire hose in the crypto world for the last several years and really focusing on distributed identity and supporting projects who are looking to bring identity to crypto. So that's been our focus.
That's great, Chris. And yeah, it's always funny when you're a controller and you're in the traditional finance industry and you're like, there's all these inefficiencies, like there's got to be some solutions, right? And then all of a sudden the blockchain pill comes in and you're like, do I take it? And then you just get, encompassed with like blockchain 24/7. And there's just so much stuff that's going on in the industry. And I know Civic is working on a lot of solutions as well that I think are going to make a huge impact in transactions all around the world. And I would love for you to just give an explanation and an overview of what are those main solutions that Civic is focused on right now.
Yeah, so we're focused in a couple of different areas. Obviously, we've been working on identity kind of since our inception. And, so far those identity use cases have played out in a variety of different ways. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is access management. We work with Johnson Controls, which is part of Tyco. It's a big multinational. They use the Civic identity for access management into office buildings. So you can imagine, every time you go into an office building, you go line up at that desk and show your identity document. And we thought to ourselves, and JCI agreed, wouldn't it be better if you could just bring your portable identity with you that has a blockchain entry that says you are who you say you are, tied to the mobile app, tied to identity documents, 3D verification, face mapping, all of the checks having been done really smooths that experience. So access management is kind of one area where we've seen a lot of interest. Another one is more sort of traditional KYC and login. So we work with a lot of projects who need to verify who their customers are. And they want that identity, importantly, I think, to be easy to use and reusable and portable even between applications. So we think there's a lot of power in the network effect of being able to have your identity and bring it with you wherever you go. And this is kind of a self-sovereign model insofar as you should be able to take your identity, bring it with you, and use it in a variety of different use cases, whether that's access management or logging into a website or to prove who you are in a variety of contexts. But I'll give you one more example. Another really interesting area that we've been working on is kind of zero knowledge proof of some fact about your identity. And one good example, we're doing a partnership with, it's called Blackfire Innovation. It's right outside of Las Vegas, in partnership with UNLV and Caesars Entertainment, to sort of demonstrate what it could look like to share a fact about you, but without sharing the underlying data, which we think is really powerful. And the way that we're demoing this is in a vending machine where we say, you can walk up, you can prove that you're of age to receive a beer, you scan the screen, you get the beer distributed. And so we're always trying to think about where are places that identity should play a part, could play a part to enable adoption of new technologies. And that's really where we're focusing, and then play that forward. Obviously, the burgeoning DeFi space and the regulatory oversight that's coming online, we think creates tremendous opportunity to really advance identity in a digital way and accelerate adoption.
Definitely. All great use cases, Chris. And I really like that beer vending machine idea. I was talking with some other companies about the zero knowledge proofs, and from what I understand, you can prove that you're 21 to get the beer, but you don't actually reveal your age, as opposed to actually giving your ID with your name and your address and your birthday and what year. It's just like, I'm over 21, but I can't tell you exactly how old I am. All you have to know is that it's over.
Right. And I think importantly, Ashton, a lot of companies don't want that data, right? I mean, this creates risk for them to ingest all of this data. Now they have security risk, storage risk, they have PII. With the advent of things like GDPR and CCPA in California, these compliance regimes, it's really important that you store data in a very secure way. So if your use case doesn't absolutely call for you to take and store personal information of your customers, you should not do that. And a lot of companies, that appeals to them. They say, we don't want to take the data. We would rather just know, give us a thumbs up, and we'll go ahead and move forward with a transaction. Otherwise, we don't want to know, right?
That's great. And you mentioned there at the end about also getting involved in the DeFi space. I'm sure identity plays a big role in finance and managing money, moving it around. And in the DeFi space right now, it's sort of 50-50 on some of the decentralized protocols. You don't really need to use any identity, and there's some anonymity. And then there's regulators coming in on the other side saying you need to be using identity for the centralized exchanges, and it's sort of moving into DeFi. So could you talk about how Civic's playing a role in DeFi and identity, and is it necessary?
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. And I in a lot of ways, I think this mirrors innovation curves that you see on a regular basis. Maybe it's on a 50-year cycle or a 100-year cycle. If you look at the adoption and the advent of stock exchanges generally 100 years ago, it was pretty much the Wild West. Anybody could come in, they could stand up an exchange, they could list a security, and that changed over time for really good reasons. There was a lot of bad actors in the space. There was a lot of need to identify who people were to drum bad actors out. But I think, we centralize and control, I think sometimes at the risk of stifling innovation. So there's a very careful balance that needs to be maintained, because I think DeFi is unbelievably innovative. It has created tremendous opportunity and access to financial products for a whole population of people for whom those things were simply not available, or in their countries were things that were precluded, or things they couldn't participate in. So the way Civic views this is there is a identity that is the core of who you are, which belongs to you. And really, I think we're adherents to a lot of the ideals of the self-sovereign identity movement, in that you should be able to attest to your own you-ness, for lack of a better term. But we also recognize that in order to participate in some of these things like financial structures, or to prove ownership of, it could be NFTs, it could be the house that you bought and making sure the title is really yours, it could be a lot of different things. But in order to be able to prove that, there is actually a need to have some authoritative documentation or authoritative government issued ID or something that you can check. So I think what we're seeing right now is kind of the tip of the spear, as you said, was the centralized exchanges and the regulatory bodies that came in and said, hey, we're going to need to understand for these large movements of money who the counterparties are on either side. So the way Civic thinks about this is, how do we take this identity need, maintain a lot of the self-sovereign and distributed identity principles and ideals, and some of the zero knowledge stuff that we were talking about before, which is, do you need to, send all of the information? It kind of reminds me of, when you go to a doctor's office and they hand you a form and they're asking you for all this information, right? It's like social security number and where do you live and your medical history and all this stuff. The reality is they probably don't need 75% of that. But there is a very important core of information they do need. They need to know what medications you're taking. You could have adverse effects from interactions of drugs or whatever. I kind of think of it that way. There's a piece that's needed. And I think DeFi sort of needs to think about generally, how do we ride that line? We don't want to stifle innovation. Lending pools, AMMs are really powerful, taking out the middlemen between transactions. DEXs are unbelievably transformative in a lot of ways. So we need to maintain that, but also protect privacy and not stifle the innovation.
Definitely. I completely agree, Chris. And you're right, about the doctor's office. I know a lot of friends that they get these long forms and they're just like, what's the minimum that I can fill out that will suffice, right. With this, what information you need, right? And I think in DeFi, it's sort of the same where, if you're doing a microtransaction and if you're in a developing nation and you're trying to get a microloan for $10 or $100 and work your way up, building like a decentralized credit score versus going on DeFi and moving $50,000, there might be a different level of identity that's needed there where, you might not be able to need to give information if you're just having very small amounts. So I think that is going to become more granular as in the DeFi space as well, and it won't be just a blanket KYC for every dollar moved.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there are different approaches I think that can be taken, and there's value in a couple of different ones. For example, you can look at a list of wallet addresses and you can say, here are known bad wallet addresses, and we're going to maintain a white list and a black list. And there are companies doing that. And that's sort of the external view looking in. It's like, how do we see what's going on from an external lens and monitor and make sure that we understand velocity and strange transactions and bad wallets and all that stuff? We're kind of taking the inverse approach, which is, what if we took it from the inside and then allowed people to share elements of identity and tied that back to something meaningful like a wallet or a deed to a house or an NFT, and attribute ownership to that in a really meaningful way that's verifiable, on-chain, distributed, and at the discretion of the user that shares the very bare minimum of the data required. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking, and there's validity in both. I think both are needed.
Definitely, I agree. And last time I spoke with the Civic team, the wallet that holds your identity was in the private beta. I'd love to hear an update on where the team is at right now with the product and where you're heading for the end of this year.
Yeah. So the wallet is now out and publicly available. We've had, I think, over 120,000 downloads. People are using it in a variety of contexts, whether that's login or vending machines or access, a whole bunch of different KYC use cases. So we're pretty excited about that. As we've talked about, we're really looking at this DeFi space. We think there's something very, very interesting there. And we think there's a real need, and Civic's technology, we feel is really well suited to serve that use case and that business area. And so, the team basically is, distributed around the world. We pretty much are focused on polishing identity, adopting things like DID standards, making sure that identity can be available cross-chain, which is really important, we think, because the proliferation of kind of, L2 chains and applications that need to be moving from, Ethereum over to other chains, or, the burgeoning Solana ecosystem, which is really coming up very, very, very strongly and quickly. We want to be in a place where we can serve all those projects. Mm-hmm. And we think identity is kind of like a universal Lego that you should be able to take from chain to chain, and it should just follow you wherever you go. It should be able to tie you to your wallet, your identity, and your, passport or driver's license, and sort of everything in between. So we've been really, really focused on those use cases and working kind of hand in glove with a whole bunch of really interesting projects.
Very cool. And yeah, definitely needed on the interoperability as DeFi continues to grow out and these other blockchain protocols are going to start interacting more closely with the Ethereum ecosystem. You really do need that identity that can spread across all of the ecosystems and just be like a universal plug and play.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, what we're finding too is, different projects are gravitating to different chains as needed for their particular use case. In the case of really high volume, high frequency type transaction use cases, we're seeing movements to, I think, Solana mostly, but also, obviously Algorand and Polkadot, and there's a whole bunch of other, really good chains and projects out there that we think are very interesting. But you said it, on the Ethereum chain, there's a ton of volume. There's, the NFT marketplace is going nuts. And there's a real need to be able to tie identity to that. So we see a lot of opportunity to actually augment what projects are already doing. And, this is one of those things that should sort of be like a utility when you're out there innovating your project and you're thinking about how we want to build something and what you want to bring to market. Being able to grab an identity piece and just layer that in without even thinking twice about it, I think makes life a lot easier. And we think it's going to accelerate innovation and interoperability as well.
I agree. And it's interesting to note that, Ethereum really doesn't have anything built into the layer one identity. They need a solution to sort of build on top there. And it sounds like Civic is already making great strides with the wallet and the 120,000 users. So congratulations on the success so far, Chris. For the viewers that are looking to learn more about Civic, the wallet, the Civic coin, and what your team is working on moving forward, what's the best place for them to get involved and find out more?
Yeah, I would encourage everybody to go to civic.com. Our blog is updated regularly with news, but also join us on our Discord server. We have a lot of interesting announcements and discussions on there, and we love to engage with the community and answer questions. So those are probably the two best places.
Sounds great, Chris. I'll leave those links in the description box below as well. All the best with Civic moving forward, and let's follow up in the near future.
All right. Thanks, Ashton. Thanks for having me.